Hello. The title of this video is Materialism and Leadership. Materialism and leadership. Now, imagine you get lost in rocky, rugged mountains and you meet a stranger. And he tells you, look, I've lived in these mountains all my life. And I may give you a little piece of advice. I may offer a bit of leadership, if you will. And you say, well, I've been lost in these mountains for days on. Can't find the way out. And I'm hungry and thirsty and tired. So what the heck? Yes, please lead me. And the stranger says, if you take this road, it will safely take you to a rich castle. There's a good, just king there and a beautiful princess. She'll fall in love with you and marry you and so on. But if you take that road, the other road, you will fall off a cliff and die. He's trying to lead you, right? Now, if he's a good leader, he is telling you the truth. Because he has your best interest at heart. But if he is bad, malevolent leader, he is telling you a lie. Because he doesn't care about your interest, your happiness, your life. And if you want to manipulate people, you have to lie to them. Unfortunately, we live in an era where there is great distrust in the very idea of leadership. Understandably so, perhaps. The last century saw the most horrible examples of leadership. Think of Hitler and the Nazis, Stalin and Mao and the communists, and so on. Well, so today, when you look at leaders, at least the visible leaders, politicians, and so forth, well, what you mostly see is you see corruption and fraud and lies, dishonesty, graft, all these things. Almost everywhere, really. Everywhere. Don't you? But if you take a brutally honest look, one cannot really criticize them. Why? Because most others, if they were in their position, if they had the power, a leader, a politician, if they had their opportunities, they would act just as corruptly. And intuitively, on some level, they know it. They know it. Of course, there are always exceptions and so forth. But we're talking a general trend here, a general picture. Why is it this way? It's the inevitable result of a peaked materialism that we live in. Yes. And if you want to know what I mean by materialism exactly, and what are its inevitable consequences when it is adopted as the ruling philosophy of a society and so on, I urge you to watch my previous videos to get the full picture, full understanding of what I'm saying here. Just to summarize briefly, utter selfishness, no real care about others, living for one's own little materialist interest only, no shared ideals, considering truth to be only relative, and lying perfectly fine and justified, if you can safely get away with it and benefit. These basic views and attitudes in people's minds and action however well masked they may be by good PR and so on, they are the necessary fruits and outcomes of materialism, the final stages of it and so forth. And it is not difficult to see that they are very conducive to corruption and to one becoming easily corruptible. By the way, distrust in leadership, which is what we experience these days. It's a wide, sweeping phenomenon. But it's funny when you look at the various aspects of the scene more closely and so on, in a more fresh way, perhaps. It's funny to see that those who most rail against the very idea of leadership, leaders, what are you talking about? You don't need any Hitler. We are free people. Liberal democracy. Leader, that's an obsolete term. You want bloody Nazi. So these very people are the ones who are the most led. Well, even though they are blind to the fact. You know them, they are, against the system, alternative, independent. Sorry. And yet, they are most conformist to their group in what they wear, what they eat, how they speak, their choice of words, the strictest and intolerant insistence on what are the right things to say and to do, and what are the wrong things to say. Well, mostly to say, because they don't usually tend to do much. And they are the least willing or able to not conform to the dictates of their own little matrix, which they happen to call freedom, for a reason unknown to me. Yeah. And again, chances are that this sort of distrust in leadership as an idea is quite inevitable as a general phenomenon in peaked materialism. They don't trust their leaders, and they well know why. Because neither do they trust a neighbor or themselves in certain situations, for that matter. Yeah. Well, yes, so it is understandable, and yet it is unfortunate, because there will always be leadership, whether one likes it or not. I mean, just think about it. Even a small group of people going climbing mountains usually has a leader, and you follow his lead, right? Well, sometimes maybe unwillingly and gritting your teeth. You may have a debate with him or protest some of his leadership, and he may make concessions, but intuitively, on some basic level, intuitively, the group will prefer to have a leader rather than being leaderless. That's an important fact, which is overlooked or suppressed. But most people, especially in terms of groups and a group reaction and so on, but not limited to that, will prefer to have a leader, and they will prefer a bad leader to a no leader. That's a hard fact. That is a hard fact of life. Now, sometimes you hear from these kinds of libertarians and anarcho-capitalists and so forth. They speak of a society based on no control, utter free will of the individual, and everything is based on free will and free contracts and so on. Yeah. I wonder how many of them have been long enough in the jungle to understand that the lion is the king, and no amount of zealous will ever join to overthrow him. But you know, even if you admit their assumptions in theory, see, once you enter into a contract, you already are led. You are led, at the very least, by the needs and demands of the person you have contracted with, the obligations contained in the contract, and etc. And so there will always be leadership of one kind or another. And the only choice you have is between good leadership and bad leadership. You may have a good leadership or a bad one. A good leader or a bad one. And the other choice you will tend to have is one between a more visible leadership and a less visible leadership. Think about it. Yeah. I would almost insist that the latter is the case today. But anyway, the more distrust you have in leadership, the more you reject it, the more invisible it tends to become. That's for sure. Okay, now the crucial thing to realize here is that the more you look away, the more you are in trouble. The more you look away, the more you are in trouble. You may have heard the phrase, closing your eyes won't make your money problems go away. Which is true. But it does not only apply to money. Everything you need to deal with, but prefer, for one reason or another, to close your eyes on it, not to look at it, will tend to get you in trouble. Because if you can't look it in the face, you don't quite know what's there. How can you then get to better understand it and better deal with it? Huh? I don't know. Why do people tend to be afraid of darkness? Because you don't know what's in there. Right? You're afraid to look. There may be nothing, but you never know unless you take a real, proper, courageous look. And the more and the harder you ignore and avoid the situation, the worse it will become. I can assure you. From my own life and many others I have known. Applies to everything. And the same it is with leadership. The more you distrust and reject any leadership, the less responsibility you are willing to take for who leads you, the less you will know who actually leads you and where. Isn't that interesting? Politics is dirty. I don't care about politicians, blah blah blah. And you wake up in a concentration camp the next day. It's brutal sometimes, I know. It's maybe overbearing. But you know, it's not as they teach you today, that you are entitled to comfort and peace. Comfort and peace in life is something you have to fight for and conquer. The previous generations knew this much more naturally or intuitively. And any upswing or downfall of any society starts with its leaders. Because most people follow them, try to follow their example, and so on, wittingly or unwittingly, accepting or denying it on the surface. Just look around. How many people do you see that do not follow what they see and read and hear in popular magazines and television, what's trending on the internet, what is exemplified by their leaders, business leaders, fashion leaders, you know, pop stars, politicians, the rich, their neighbors. How many, honestly, how many? How many of them you can say he is his own man, he's his own person? Not very many, I would say. Not very many. And I don't think it's, in principle, has been much different at any time in the past. Now, if your leaders try to adopt higher ideals, higher ethical ideals, which sometimes happens, the general tone in society will change. Most others will try to follow, as is their nature, to adapt, live up to their leader's example, or at least try for it, pretend it, But if you pretend long and hard enough, it's so is that it may, some of it may actually become real. that's another interesting thing to notice. Not saying it's always true, but it often is. So certainly, most of them will make an effort to adapt to the now newly expected level of moral behavior, etc. Social pressure, that ugly word, plays a big role here, actually. And it can be used for good or bad, that's for sure. But so can everything else. And vice versa. If your leaders adopt a contrary policy, direction, you know what I mean to say. Now, I can hear some people, getting loud. What are you talking about? We have the law. We have the rule of law. We don't need any leaders. We live in a beautiful, democratic society full of liberty. We are not that primitive. We are sophisticated now. We can rule ourselves. If everybody is just free enough, there'll be paradise on earth. Paradise on earth, excuse me. Yeah, these people never stop amazing me. I suspect that when they speak of the law, they imagine it as a living being. It has ears and eyes and a snout and legs and muscles, and it breathes and get you in a real grip. Look, it may be worth the time to meditate one day about the people to whom a mere word, is heavier and perhaps even more physically painful than a hit with a hammer. Because there's something essentially wrong with these people. Law is a dead letter. And it is always to be interpreted and applied by real, living people. Now, if you see, imagine if a certain set of people adopts certain laws and ways, which are now, when the situation changes, to be interpreted and applied in real life by a set of different people, very different people, whose basic mindset, attitudes, views and values are very different, incomparable. Do you believe that this other group, who now is to interpret and apply the sacred law, do you really believe that they will do so? They will interpret and apply these laws in the same way? They won't change them? whether in writing or just in fact. Do you really believe that? You really believe that a letter, a written sign, a symbol is more powerful than a man's will? Than man's will? I don't think you do. I hope you don't. And well, there's another suggestion, a neutral one, a third way, so to speak, and that is neutral, perfectly calculated leadership by intelligent machines, supercomputers, super intelligent computers, etc. Well, a super machine may be able to supercompute, but it can never adopt higher ethical ideals because it does not feel. It does not hurt, and it cannot have compassion. And it cannot look up in the stars and dream of inheriting the universe. And so, in closing, distrust in leadership is inevitable in peaked materialism, as is distrust of one man and the other. And distrust in leadership leads to no responsibility for leadership, leading to bad leadership. And bad leadership leads to death. Thanks for watching.